All right, everyone, good morning. Thank you for joining. I know there are people still coming in, but we want to go ahead and get started to keep us on time. So welcome to the Bounce Grand Rounds, May 20th, 2025, from Insight to Impact, Positive and Adverse Childhood Experiences and Substance Use. So a couple of housekeeping rules. Please stay muted unless speaking. You can drop any questions that you have in the chat. And a reminder that today's event is being recorded. If you can go ahead and answer the prompts in the chat. Some other housekeeping that we want to welcome our sponsor, Paige Franklin. She's our CEO of Aetna and one of the sponsors for this event. And Paige was going to provide some brief remarks. If she's available, you can go ahead and start.
Hi, good morning. I'm here. Paige Franklin. I'm the market president, CEO for Aetna Better Health of Kentucky. I'm so excited to welcome you all to today's Ground Rounds on behalf of Aetna Better Health of Kentucky. At Aetna, we believe that building healthier communities starts with investing in children and their families, and a big part of that is addressing the root causes of trauma and adversity. So we're incredibly grateful for the work that the Bounce Coalition and Kentucky Youth Advocates are doing to equip communities across the Commonwealth with tools, training, and the strategies they need to build resilience and promote healing. And so we're just sincerely appreciative to everyone that's attending the meeting today for being so dedicated to this cause, and we couldn't be more proud to walk alongside you. So thank you so much for inviting us to join and allowing us to be a part of this great work, and thank you for giving me a quick moment of your time. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Paige, and thank you, Aetna, for sponsoring this event. And I didn't fully introduce myself. I'm Dr. Jennifer Porter. I'm a general pediatrician at University of Louisville and part of the Grand Rounds Planning Committee. So next, we'll have Karina Cash from Kentucky Youth Advocates. She's going to talk about a new initiative.
Hello, and good morning. Great to be here with everyone. My name is Karina Cash, and I am the Data and Research Director here at Kentucky Youth Advocates. I am so excited to be here with you all today and discuss ACEs and substance use prevention, and equally as excited to share a tool that I think y'all will find very helpful in your work. It is our new opioid data dashboard for children and families. So as you all may know, counties across Kentucky and really across the whole country will be receiving large amounts of money over an 18-year period, specifically for opioid use prevention, abatement, and treatment through the Opioid Settlement Fund. With so much money coming in, KYA wanted to create a tool that would allow community organizations, advocates, and leaders to easily access data related to the impact of opioid epidemic in Kentucky and in their county, specifically on children and families, as well as get ideas on best practices and innovative ideas other Kentucky counties have implemented in this arena that they could replicate using this funds. So all of that accumulated to the opioid data dashboard on children and families, which I believe will be put in the chat. This dashboard is full of county, regional, and state level data on really everything related to opioid use, from things like risk and protective factors, chronic absenteeism, ACEs, PACEs, to the more adverse impacts of opioid use, such as non-fatal drug-related emergency room visits among youth, to opioid treatment. We have data on Medicaid claims for youth accessing substance abuse treatment. All of this data is also paired with information on how counties have used their local opioid settlement funds, as well as some best practices and innovative programming related to addressing opioid use and substance use that have been implemented across Kentucky. All of these programs also have information on how you could get that program started in your county, as well as contact information if you want to learn more. So part of this dashboard, which I saw Sasha just put in the chat, is that we will be having a webinar on June the 4th at 11 a.m. To walk through this dashboard, best practice on how to use it. And then Lauren Carr with the Kentucky Association of Counties will also be joining us to give advocates information on what is really the best way to be reaching out to your local county officials and talking about these opioid funds and getting projects started at the county level. So the information to register for that has been put in the chat, and we would love to see you there and also love to see you using the dashboard. And the event on the 4th will be recorded. And then I'm not sure who I'm supposed to turn it over to. Is that back to you, Dr. Porter?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for that information. So now we're going to start with our main presentation. It's going to be from Miriam Silman and Tiffany Quarles. They'll give brief introductions on themselves as they talk. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Good morning, everyone. I am Tiffany Quarles. I am the Alcohol Prevention Enhancement Specialist at the Division of Substance Use Disorder Prevention and Promotion Branch. And I'm going to be doing part of the presentation for you guys today, and Miriam is going to be doing the other half. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Miriam Silman. I'm an executive advisor at the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. And my background is on the trauma side. I don't have strong background in SUD, although there's no way you can do trauma work for almost 40 years and not have interface with the SUD world. But I also know from my research and from reading the research how intimately they are connected. And so I'm really glad that Tiffany and I are able to do this together, because I think it models a really good example of how all this work is interconnected and can't be done in isolation. So we're excited to share with you today. I'm getting ready to share the screen. We do have slides, and you should, I think, have a copy of the slides available to you in the packet of materials that is coming. Hang on just for 1 second. I'm just going to tell the organizers, for whatever reason, I'm not able to see the chat at the moment. So if there's something that comes into chat, you'll have to let us know. I'm not going to take time to attend to that right now. So we're going to talk to you about the idea of really what can we be doing in our communities to be able to prevent substance use disorder, promote all of the protective factors that can enhance that protection. Sorry, a little technology challenge today. Okay, so we all, I think, know about ACEs, and when we were first approached by KYA to talk about this, they said, you know, we really want to talk about this connection between ACEs and substance use disorder. And we know that there's strong connection, which I'm going to talk about some of the research in just a minute. But I did want to remind you that we think about ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, in multiple ways. There's kind of there's the very specific way that the original research defined ACEs, which in this diagram you see in the trunk and the branches of the tree, those things that happen in families and in households. And since then, we've also all recognized, and we know from our experience as humans, but also our experiences in the world of human services, that there are many other realms in which children, and in fact all people, can experience adversity and trauma. So what we know is that we sometimes talk about adverse experiences in the kind of generic umbrella way, and other times we're talking about the very specific adverse childhood experiences that were measured in the original study in 1998. I think it's important to know that a large part of the research has been about those original 10, but we're seeing more and more research, very good research and strong, robust research over all these many decades about other areas, particularly about what you see in the root system, the adverse community experiences, what we sometimes talk about and are connected to social drivers of health, social determinants of health, depending on the language that you use. So I just want you to keep this in mind, because I think it becomes really important to think in systems ways when you're thinking about prevention and promotion. This is a wonderful diagram, and you can download the graphic at the link that's provided in the slides. So overall, you know, what does the research tell us about this connection between adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and substance use disorder? We definitely know for many, many decades have a plethora of research that says there is a significant correlation between adversity in childhood and the development of substance use disorder, not just using substances, but substance use disorder later in life. We also know that there's a dose response. That means that the more adversity in childhood, the greater the risk of developing that substance use disorder. There also is some research that shows that the dose response is not only about the risk of developing SUD, but it's also about the severity of that SUD. And one of the things that I'll share with you is in some research that I did about 10 years ago, one of the things that we saw was that adolescents in Kentucky who were referred for substance use, and at the time of their referral, nobody knew anything about their trauma history. But as part of their overall assessment, we had them complete measures around their trauma exposure and their traumatic stress symptoms. And what we saw in that study, and this was kind of interesting, is that the youth who had polysubstance disorder, so they were using all kinds of substances, and they really had an early onset of use, had a much higher dose of exposure to trauma in childhood. And so we're starting to see even some research that says certain kinds of trauma may even lead to certain kinds or lead to a greater risk of certain kinds of substance use. I think it's too early to say that we know that for sure, but it's interesting to kind of consider all of this. We also know that the age of trauma onset may be something to pay attention to, and that early and long-lasting trauma may have an impact on severity and impact treatment outcome, make people have higher or lower risks of better or worse outcomes. And we also know that adults who have substance use disorder, if they had onset of that substance use disorder, again, make that distinction between substance use and substance use disorder. So if looking back, if we can say, well, it really is clear that they had a full-blown substance use disorder in adolescence, that seems to be correlated to having had adversity in their earlier childhood. We also know that people starting with youth in the juvenile justice system, but continuing through adults who are engaged in the justice system in one way or another, have very, very high rates of childhood trauma. And we also see this in adults who are in SUD treatment and recovery programs. So this, comes from literally thousands of studies with hundreds of thousands of research participants. And the next few slides give you some specific statistics. This comes from the Strategic Prevention Technical Assistance Center. This, again, was based on using a definition of ACEs as the original ACEs. But you see these extraordinarily high rates, right? People with ACEs are at greater risk for a plethora of mental health, but also substance use. 7 times more likely to develop alcoholism, 2 to 4 times higher risk of using alcohol or other drugs, not talking about a disorder at that time, but also, again, that earlier onset, 2 to 4 times more likely to begin use at a younger age, and 7 to 10 times more likely for people who have 5 or more ACEs to inject illicit substances, to have illicit substance use addiction, or to use any substances. So those are very, very high numbers. We see that women who have 3 or more ACEs are at particularly increased risk for substance use disorder. But for men, it's the presence of any ACE. It doesn't have to reach that threshold of 3. That adults with ACEs have a 4-fold greater likelihood of substance use disorder than those who do not report having had adverse childhood experiences. And that 5 or more ACEs seems to present a greater risk, 3 times greater risk of misuse of prescribed pain medication. And I think that that's really interesting for us to consider as we are thinking about the misuse of opioids in Kentucky. A recent study late last year from the University of Kentucky, from Dr. Amy Meadows and other folks there, found that that looked at people at age 15 who reported 4 or more ACEs. They were much more likely, if you reported 4 or more ACEs, to use non-prescribed opiates and smoke cigarettes. And remember that while we may not always think about smoking as substance use disorder, we know the connections, especially in adolescence, between cigarette smoking, vaping, and use of tobacco and use of other substances. And again, some other research around for men, five-fold higher likelihood of illicit drug use disorder, and for women, an almost six-fold higher chance of developing an alcohol disorder. Now, you see these kind of subtle differences, and all this research is very, very specific in that way. And I do want to say that we also have some research about the other side of the coin. So one of the things that we've learned, and we've always known, but we're starting to learn better from the research, is the power of the positive, the power of protective factors. And when we're thinking about prevention, we cannot be thinking about preventing something bad from happening without also considering how we are promoting the counter to that, the good to it. In 2011, there was an earlier than when most people were talking about this study that linked what they were calling positive experiences in childhood with substance use, and they looked at these 4 positive experiences in childhood: being engaged in community, having interpersonal connections. Sorry about that typo. We somehow missed. I missed it. It's my slide. Sorry about that. Productivity and responsibility during childhood, and getting physical exercise. And what they saw was that all 4 were good for adult functioning overall, which you can imagine is somewhat protective against substance use disorder. Better functioning may mean that the likelihood of developing a substance use disorder is lowered, but also lowered the rate of adolescent substance abuse, that even when the adolescent substance use was present, that the presence of these 4 positive experiences improved functioning later in life. But they also saw that kids who were using substances had lower rates of civic engagement or involvement, and had lower rates of what they were measuring as productivity and responsibility. So you might be thinking, well, this seems pretty obvious, and I think it does. But remember that it's really important for us to have research. Now, after 2011 and 2019, we had the publication of the Positive Childhood Experiences Study. And that came out of some Burfus data that was used from Wisconsin. And in addition to measuring adverse childhood experiences, again, using those original 10, they also looked at 7 positive childhood experiences, and were particularly looking at the impact of the adverse and positive experiences in childhood on adult mental health and functioning. And they came away from that pretty large sample, over 6,000 people, using the same methodology as the original ACEs study, with 3, I think, important takeaways. The first one at the bottom is the dose response. And so that was good news. Just as we know that more adversity can increase risk, we actually can see that more positive can reduce risk. And that's a good thing, because it would be terrible if it didn't have that cumulative positive effect. So that means that we should always be promoting the positive, because it matters. The second thing, which I think is really important for the conversation that you're about to have with Tiffany, is that the positive can mitigate the negative effect of the adverse, especially regarding mental health in adulthood. So that meant that when they looked at people in the study who reported 4 or more ACEs, but also reported positive experiences, and when they looked at the different levels of positive experiences that were reported, they saw a real correlation that even with 4 or more ACEs, as you have more positive experiences, it really reduces your risk of depression and negative mental health. Now, this didn't look specifically at substance use, but we know that these things often are commingled. The last thing that this study pointed out is that having positive experiences in childhood matters for everybody, whether you have ACEs or not. And this is something that I think is really, really critical and a very powerful part of thinking about prevention and promotion. What it tells us is that we have to be promoting the positive universally because it matters for everybody. It is not enough for us to say, well, if nothing bad is happening, that's good enough. Because if nothing bad is happening, but nothing good is happening, people may be at higher risk, certainly in the mental health realm. And we could imagine, I think we all know anecdotally from our experience, both professionally and personally, what that looks like. So as you hear from Tiffany about the opportunities for prevention and promotion in Kentucky, I hope you can keep this framework in mind, that we see these very clear connections between adverse childhood experiences and adolescent and adult substance use disorder. And we also see the potential for positive experiences in childhood to be part of that prevention and promotion to counter those risks. And I will pass to Tiffany. Is Tiffany on? I'm sorry. There we go.
I have lost my volume. Can you hear me? There we go.
Yes,
I've got
now
a
we
green
can hear
light
you.
now.
Yes,
Great,
now we
thank
can hear you.
you. If I lose volume, just please let me know. I would hate to be speaking and it not know where I was at. So I'm going to really take the time. We're going to go over a few slides and they're going to be kind of basic, but it's just to kind of lay the groundwork a little bit about how we have a relationship between ACEs and positive childhood experiences and prevention and promotion work. So it's kind of to use some prevention language here. We talk about risk factors and protective factors. Risk factors in adverse childhood experiences are really similar because they both identify things that increase the chances of negative outcomes later in life, like substance use, mental health challenges, and chronic health problems. Risk factors include things like poverty, peer pressure, community violence. Risk factors aren't just what happened in childhood, right? Protective factors in positive childhood experiences are really similar because they both describe conditions or experiences that help people thrive. Even when life's difficult, they really help people try to thrive. So protective factors are things like strong family bonds, positive school environments, access to mentors, and really just good problem solving skills are all protective factors. And they all help us understand both the risk and protective factors and the positive or protective factors really help us understand what puts people at greater risk and what helps them stay strong and resilient. And both of those are crucial when we start designing effective prevention and promotion strategies. Okay, so there we go. So the goal in prevention is really pretty simple, but it's powerful nonetheless. We're going to increase the protective factors and we're going to decrease risk factors. So we want to strengthen the things that help individuals, families, and communities stay healthy and resilient, while we reduce the things that put them at greater risk for challenges like substance use and mental health issues. So when we build up strong connections like life skills, safe environments, and supportive relationships, and at the same time work to lower stress, trauma, other harmful influences, we create a stronger foundation for lifelong health and success. So there is a little area here you'll notice on the screen where we kind of have a little different shade of blue-green there. And these are our shared risk and protective factors. And these are factors that affect multiple health outcomes at once. So not just one issue like substance use, but also things like mental health challenges, violence, chronic illness. Shared risk factors are conditions or experiences that increase the likelihood of several different negative outcomes. So for example, things like poverty, trauma, discrimination, social isolation. Those are all risk factors that can lead to substance use, mental health struggles, and violence. But then we have shared protective factors, and these are strengths or supports that lower the likelihood of many different problems and promote healthy development across the board. So examples of that are strong, supportive relationships, access to safe and stable housing, involvement in positive activities, and good emotional regulation skills. So when we focus on those shared risk and protective factors, we really can have a bigger impact. So instead of tackling each issue separately, like trying to focus just on substance use or just on suicide or just on violence, all in isolation, we can work on improving the conditions that affect them all at once. This really leverages our capacity in our communities, right? Like the ability to do the work. It also really allows us to leverage our funding to make sure when we are trying to address more than one issue at a time. So why do we even focus on shared risk and protective factors? Well, first of all, once again, it's more efficient, right? We can take one action and we can prevent multiple problems. So it's really, really helpful in that regard. It's also more sustainable. It strengthens the whole community, not just one particular program. And it's also more equitable because it really addresses the root causes like inequality and trauma, not just those surface level symptoms. So think about your health disparities and things like that, your social determinants of health. That's kind of where we get to when we are starting to look at shared risk and protective factors and prevention. So in short, focusing on shared risk and protective factors really helps create healthier communities overall, not just in one area, but across all aspects of life. It's also really important to remember that prevention is not just limited to youth. Prevention also focuses on adults. And when we work with adults, we really work to prevent and reduce the health and social harms of substance use, as well as the progression to substance use disorder. This is important because substance misuse doesn't just start or stop with youth, right? While preventing early use is critical, that is the crux of what we do. We also know that many adults face risks that can lead to substance misuse, health problems, and even substance use disorders later in life. Adults may begin misusing substances due to stress, trauma, mental health challenges. We also have some social pressures or even major life events like job loss, chronic pain, grief. Really a good example of this is if we think to COVID, during the time of COVID, where we saw an increase in adult using and misusing alcohol. This has been attributed to some of the trauma, grief, and stress that people were experiencing as a result of a global pandemic. Okay, so we saw this increase really for the first time in a lot of years, looking at the data, huge increase with the adult population. So by intervening with adults, we don't just help that individual, though. We strengthen the entire family, we strengthen the community. And we really, when we look at prevention across a lifespan, it's essential because people face different risks and challenges at every age. And it's never too late to make that positive change. So prevention plays a powerful role in building healthier communities. It really helps us address the risk factors. It helps us strengthen protective factors. It helps us reduce the harms linked to adverse childhood experiences, and it really helps us promote positive childhood experiences. So through prevention efforts, we can lower the chances of substance misuse and mental health challenges while creating the kinds of supportive environments where kids, families, and communities can truly thrive. And really, that is the heart of prevention work right there, is we don't do as much individual work with individual clients, but we do a lot of community work in trying to change some of the social constructs that are there and change that environment so that we will have less substance use in the future. So just like with everything, there are some best practices in prevention. And we're going to start with some things that we know don't work well. I really don't like starting with a negative, but we are going to start there. We're going to talk about things that just aren't what we consider best practice. And what we're starting with is scare tactics. So a scare tactic is a strategy that tries to influence people's behavior just by using fear. It's often by exaggerating or focusing only on the worst possible outcomes. So in prevention, scare tactics usually involve showing extreme dangers of drug or alcohol use, like overdose, death, severe addiction, in a very dramatic way. So with the hope that the fear alone will convince people not to engage in the risky behavior. While scare tactics do get attention, right? They often don't build trust, skills, or resilience. They also don't typically lead to long-term change in behavior. There are also many strategies that are commonly used by very well-meaning parents, teachers, schools, community members that have actually been shown through some careful research to be ineffective. In some cases, these strategies can even do harm because they unintentionally reinforce positive attitude towards substance use. They can lead to risky behaviors or even unhealthy norms. So basically, the opposite of what we are trying to do, some of these strategies can lead to that. So some examples of what is not considered best practice in prevention science include one and done assemblies, presentations by individuals in recovery without a broader prevention framework. It needs to be part of a bigger, more comprehensive plan, and the use of scare tactics. And while these approaches often come from a place of good intention, right? Our communities like them. They make us feel like we kind of the shock and awe, right? Like we are really doing something that's getting a young person's attention. And a lot of times they have a lot of community support. So think about like a lot of times when I showed an image of a mock car crash, well, that gets your police department involved, right? Your emergency personnel may be involved. You can get lots of community people involved in this, and they feel like it's really making a difference. So it does come from a place of, I think, good intentions, but these type of programs really don't build skills. They don't build any resilience or protective factors that really support long-term healthy choices. So prevention science shows us that effective strategies must be consistent, they must be evidence-based, developmentally appropriate, and rooted in building strong relationships in communities, not just delivering information or creating fear. So in prevention, it's really important that we stick with what we know works. And that means using evidence-based strategies. These are approaches that have been carefully studied and shown to actually make a real difference in the health behaviors and choices of young people. Because they're backed by solid research, we know that these strategies have been tested, they've been evaluated, and they've been proven to work over time. So when we use evidence-based strategies, we're not just guessing, right? We're giving young people the best chance to make healthy choices and build strong futures, and it's all based on science. And I think that's the biggest difference there. So there are a few important things that most evidence-based prevention strategies do have in common. First of all, they are usually strength-based, meaning that they focus on the positive, right? Kind of like we've already been talking about. They focus on the skills, the talents, and the potential of a person or a group. Instead of just pointing out what's wrong or risky. So we in prevention, we have kind of adopted the phrase, focus on what's strong, not what's wrong. And when we think about that, it's really leads to evidence-based practices. Those evidence-based practices also put a big emphasis on building social and emotional learning skills in young people, like managing your emotions, making good decisions, and building healthy relationships. So when we build on strengths and teach real life skills, right, we set our young people up for long-term success, not just short-term fixes. We're teaching them what they need in order to be successful over the long haul. So there are 3 best practices. Sorry, it's the next slide, Miriam. There are 3 best practices that I like to share when it comes to addressing substance use, especially with young people. First of all, it's really important to start early and to talk often. Look for natural ways to weave conversations about substance use into everyday life, at home, at school, in the community. In my house, many of these conversations happen in the car, right? Because that's where we are for long periods of time. And I have they can't get away from me when we're in the vehicle. So we have lots of those conversations there. We have found that those continuous conversations, and when we weave the information into everyday life and everyday conversations, they really are more impactful than one big, what we feel like is going to be a more powerful, serious talk, right? So those short conversations really matter. Second, keep your message consistent. It's really important that young people hear a clear and steady message about expectations around substance use. Consistency really helps us avoid confusion, and it helps our children build trust. When youth know exactly where the adults in their lives stand, they are more likely to make safer choices. And the final thing really is remember that learning takes repetition. Humans need to hear information multiple times and practice new skills before it really sticks. So repeating consistent messages and giving young people chances to practice healthy decision making really helps them internalize what they learn and builds their confidence to apply it in real life. So the community members can make a real difference when it comes to reducing adverse childhood experiences and building up positive childhood experiences. And one way that we can do this is by choosing programs and policies that are proven to work, fit our community's needs, and can grow over time. Every effort we make to lower adversity and raise up positive experiences helps our kids, it helps our families, and our whole community stay healthier and stronger for the long run. And so on the screen, you're going to see some examples of programs and organizations that are dedicated to strengthening our communities and our families and increasing the positive. So you will see we have the regional prevention centers up there. There are 14 of those across the state. They are all located in our community mental health centers. And their focus is just on substance use and mental health. We have the dinner table project that we're going to talk more about. That is very exciting. I hope y'all like that information. We have Youth Thrive in Kentucky, Strengthening Families. There is the Hope, which is healthy outcomes from positive experiences. And we have Park, so which is Partnership for a Resilient Kentucky. And those are all great organizations and great groups that really share the message of sharing the positive. So now we're going to go through some specific campaigns that might really be helpful for you and your communities. The first one is one that is really new, but I'm very excited about this program. It's a statewide campaign that it just launched in February of 25. So it is really just a baby. And it was launched by the Attorney General Russell Coleman's office in partnership with the University of Kentucky, the University of Louisville, and Western Kentucky University. Now, it is based off of a program out of Florida. and it's called Better Without It. So Better Without It is a prevention campaign that empowers Kentucky teens and young adults to live drug-free by focusing on what they gain, not just on what to avoid. The campaign shifts the message from simply saying no to helping youth build a lifestyle that they're very excited to say yes to. It focuses on positive alternatives, personal growth, and strong connections with family, peers, schools, and with your community. Through uplifting messaging, outreach events, and partnerships, they aim to reduce drug use and support young people in becoming their best selves. The goal is simple. They want to show teens that life is better without it, because when they have purpose, support, and opportunity, they can thrive. And I just love the messaging of this. It feels so positive. And I'm really excited to see where this campaign leads. On the next slide, or are we just going to show them, Miriam? There we go. When we look at the Better Without It, part of their campaign is they have partnered with, like I said, the universities, and they are using a lot of their athletes to help promote the program. So if you look on your website, they have different universities and different schools will have banners and signs, and some of them will say like the cards are better without it, or the cats are better without it. But they've also put together, besides their promotional materials, they've put together some PSAs. So we're going to watch a couple of those real quick, just so you can see them. First one, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did the screen change? Are you seeing the
Yes.
video? Okay, good.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am. No, you're fine. The first one we're going to watch is with Kentucky basketball player Cassidy Rowe. And if you look once again on the website, they have a variety of athletes to choose from different schools. This Cassidy's honestly is just the first one that shows up when you log in. But you can choose if you have a particular school that's dear to your heart. There are different options. So we can watch this video.
Important to have a passion, because it's important to have something that's bigger than yourself, that you find joy in, that you can work towards every single day. I would say that basketball has positively influenced my life greater than any other thing that I've done, because it has allowed me to build so many great relationships, and it's taught me resilience and accountability and discipline and so many things that I use in life every single day. I've witnessed how drugs have negatively impacted people in my community, and I know that by pursuing my passion, I've been able to make positive choices that have helped me grow as a person and an athlete. If you're feeling pressured, I would just encourage you to stay true to yourself and not let others influence you to become something that you're not. It's okay to stand out and make choices that reflect who you really are. My name is Cassidy Rowe, and I'm better without it. I think it's important to
Thanks, Miriam. And I'll be honest, I am I'm the parent to a teenage daughter who is an athlete. And videos like this are really going to speak to her and really help drive that message home about the strength-based approach, and about, that it is okay to be better without it. So now we're going to show you a second video from Better Without It. We're going to discuss this one just a little bit once we get done with it. But if you want to go ahead and show it, Miriam, that would be great. Thank you.
Self shows up when I let my passion take over. Don't let the world get in the way. The distractions, the pressure to fit in. Because this energy is all just noise. This is a reminder to keep moving forward.
I'm here to fit into me.
To fit into me.
Find what you love and chase it with all your heart. There'll be distractions, doubts, but it's nothing you can't shake off. Because when you put in the love and the work, there's no feeling like it. So find your own path to greatness. There's a whole world out there to explore. When you chase your passions, your dreams, you make it worth it. We each have but one life. When you live with purpose, it's just better.
Just better.
Just better.
Great. Thank you. So this one we wanted to talk about just a little bit because while it feels super encouraging, right? We do need to acknowledge at one point in the video, you'll saw where they said that you might encounter distractions and doubts, but it's nothing that you can't shake off. And we know for some kids that that may not be the case, right? They may not be able to just shake it off. So if you use this video, we really encourage you to follow up by asking them what they think, what do you think, and then ask them ask them if there's anything they ever feel like they can't shake off. And by letting them answer that question, let them know that you're available. And that that you are happy to help them if there are things that they need help with. That video, like I said, while it seems great, we also do need to really come with that understanding and that acknowledgement that some youth can't just shake it off.
And I'm just going to jump in, Tiffany, and say I think this is a really good example that there may not be a perfect prevention tool out there for your community or the kids you're working with. And it doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater, which I know is a terrible expression. I'm sorry, I need to find a different thing to say for that. But the idea being that like what's really going to work, as Tiffany said, is the relationship, the engagement, the conversation. So these should be launch points and launch pads for those things. And both of these can be, even if the kids who you're working with or the families, they don't relate maybe exactly, or they don't fit into everything, it still gives you a way to start to have conversations. But the most important thing is to continue to do that. And so I was a bit of a purist for a long time. The beauty of getting old is you become more forgiving. And I would sometimes, like maybe in my earlier years, I would have said to Tiffany, no, we can't show that because of this. And I think that that's the wrong approach, that we absolutely should, because this is part of life. And we want kids to know that there's just a variety of ways and different times. Like for every kid, there's going to be something in their life, in their adolescence, that isn't so easily shaken off in that way. Okay, I'm done.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. And it is really just an important reminder for us. This program is also in its infancy. I'm going to let you know. It's like, like I said, it started in February. So I am very interested to see how it progresses over the next few months and if there are tweaks that are made to any of the messaging. So the next one that we're going to talk about is Talk They Hear You. This is a national media campaign, and it's sponsored by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, or SAMHSA. The campaign is really geared towards adults, and we're going to watch some PSAs in a minute. You will see a major difference. It's geared towards parents, teachers, caregivers, and it really focuses on the importance of talking to young people about underage substance use. They are very much, let's talk early, let's talk often, and let's talk a lot. They really some of the campaign goals really is to increase parents' awareness of the prevalence and of the risk of underage drinking and substance use. They focus on equipping parents with the knowledge, skills, and confidence needed to talk to their kids about substances and alcohol. And they really want to focus on increasing parents' actions to prevent underage substance use. And so really, it's just a call for parents. The next slide has a couple of PSAs on these. These are very short. Sorry, go ahead.
We all want our kids to grow up safe and healthy, so we show them how, and we tell them with honest conversations that let them know what we expect That's especially important when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. Kids need to know the dangers and how to avoid them. And when it comes to pain medications, opioids, they need to know that they should never be taken without a prescription and never shared with friends or family. It's dangerous and illegal. So talk with your kids, because when you talk, they hear you.
Okay,
You
and we
ready
can
for
go
the
ahead and
next
show
one
stuff
too?
with- Yes, we can go ahead and show it too. Thank you.
Matthew.
I know that a lot of times, Mom, it might not seem like I'm listening to you, but I am.
Welcome.
And what you
I'm
say
Dr.
really
Amy
does matter
Cohen,
to me.
Program
All the
Director for
talks we've
SMA
had over the
Advisor
years,
and a clinical
including what you've told me
psychologist.
about not using
I am
alcohol
pleased
and
that you're
other
joining
drugs,
us for
they stick
today.
with me, and they make a difference, especially.
It's okay. There we
I
go.
know that a lot of times, Mom, it might not seem like I'm listening to you, but I am. And what you say really does matter to me.
All the talks we've had over the years, including what you've told me about not using alcohol and other drugs, they stick with me, and they make a difference, especially at times that matter most.
Hey, want a drink?
No thanks, I'm good. So thank you, Dad, for preparing me for what's ahead.
Thanks, Mom, for always being my biggest fan.
Thank you for talking.
Talk, they hear you.
Thanks, Miriam. So you can tell a huge difference, right, in which ones were for youth and which ones were for adults. But I will say that Talk, They Hear You is a great example of shared risk, of working on shared risk and protective factors. When Talk, They Hear You was originally created, it focused on alcohol only. That was all that it talked about. And in 2000, I think it was maybe 2011, they realized that, you know what, these are the exact same things we should be telling kids about all substances, not just alcohol. And so they really, at that point in time, decided to leverage their work and their message by expanding it to all substances. And it's been really very successful.
And I would say that you should feel free to think about Talk, They Hear You for any trusted adult in a child's life, right? You know, it's geared for parents, but there are lots of other trusted adults and the messaging is the same. And we sometimes think that people know how to start these conversations, and it sometimes just is the thing that gives people the nudge to actually do it.
Absolutely. And honestly, that is a perfect segue into this piece that we're getting ready to talk about. Now we're going to talk about a statewide campaign. And so this campaign is called the Dinner Table Project. It was originally created by a prevention specialist at Four Rivers Behavioral Health, which is one of our prevention centers. And it has since been expanded across the entire state. So the campaign capitalizes on the protective qualities of family mealtime, right? That's pretty simple, but it's so protective. Eating dinner together without phones, tablets, TVs, or other screens can help reduce the risk of substance use, eating disorders, and depression. I want to say that again. Just eating dinner together at the table is that protective, that it can help reduce substance use, eating disorders, and depression. That is hugely powerful. It can also boost school performance, and it can also build a young person's self-esteem. So the Dinner Table Project encourages families to eat together at least once a week with no electronics. The idea is simple, that families who eat together have stronger relationships. And when kids have strong family bonds, they are less likely to use drugs or alcohol. The program has several components. They have a newsletter for parents, which comes out with recipes. Let's see here, I'm sorry. The newsletter has recipes each month. So we have the Dinner Table Project newsletter up there and what they call Table Talks, which is for older children, teens. It also has a mid-month mini that comes out, which is for parents or caregivers that really boost communication. There's dinner table boxes, which we're going to talk about more in a minute. And there's conversation starters to really help parents talk to their young people. So this slide really, oh, I don't think it made it in there. Okay, never mind. We'll skip. So these are the conversation starters. They range from silly, like what is your favorite joke, to serious, like what is your favorite thing about yourself. And the focus is really on talking to your young people and getting them to talk to you and focusing on positive attributes that your children have. These are part of every newsletter that comes out, and some of them appear on the dinner table project boxes as well. We have even started incorporating these into some of our staff meetings. Instead of doing an icebreaker question, we have started pulling some of the dinner table project questions and asking them. And last week I asked, it was my turn to lead. And I said, can you all tell me what is your favorite thing about yourself? And this meeting, like, they were like, no one's ever asked me what my favorite thing about myself is. And I'm not sure. And we're adults, right? And so it was really kind of a powerful moment. And also really made me think about how important that would be, how powerful that could be for our kids to have that opportunity to verbalize what they think the best part of themselves is.
And again, I just want to remind all of you as providers, as professionals, to when you're talking with parents, that the protective factor of connection doesn't mean that every conversation is specific to substance use prevention for it to be part of substance use prevention.
Absolutely. Yes, like none of the questions for Dinner Table Project have anything to do with substances. They really are just starting to talk. I do want to mention also, I mentioned it briefly, that they have the dinner table boxes. And what they are actual boxes that you can sit on your table. They encourage you, you can sit them in the, right, yes, there's one there in the bottom corner. That you can sit on your table to put devices in during dinner time. The outside of the box does have conversation starters on it, just to help families get started talking. I know that, I jokingly tell my family sometimes I'm glad I went to dinner with the tops of their head, because everybody is looking on Instagram or they're trying to check something else. And so it's a great way to be able to cut the screen time at dinner time. But they didn't stop there. This project also provides placemats for younger children that have games and activities on them. They have yard signs, they have magnets, coloring books, push cards. They have meal planners, which I think is amazing because, they really focus on that dinner time project. They have billboards. They also have recipe cards. So anyway, it's a great project that is out there. It also, all the materials are geared. They also have some materials, that are specifically for our service members, veterans and their families. And they also have the materials in Spanish. So they have really tried to diversify the project as much as they can. Another statewide initiative we have is called Partners in Prevention. This is a project that also started out of a regional prevention center, and this one started out of Comprehend, and it has also been shared statewide. So Partners in Prevention is a program that brings local community partners together to discuss substance misuse and suicide. So it focuses on reducing stigma and building support through education, resources, and prevention strategies. The program helps communities connect with key groups to raise awareness of their role in prevention. So that's really the focus of all of it, is that we are all partners in prevention. Every member of the community. You don't have to have prevention in your title to be effective. So think about your hairdressers, right? They hear all kinds of things when you sit down in the chair to get your hair done. And so it's really to help empower them and give them the tools that they can use in their community prevention role. The program also really focuses on increasing protective factors and reducing risk, and builds strong partnerships through the regional prevention centers. There is a toolkit, which you see listed there on the screen, and it includes helpful information and tools for those different community sectors. It helps them boost their knowledge, improve their prevention efforts, and support mental and behavioral health. And once again, one of the key tenets is that everyone is a part of prevention. And finally, the last substance prevention initiative we're going to share is Too Good for Drugs. And this is from the Mendez Foundation. Too Good for Drugs is an evidence-based prevention education. It's an actual curriculum, okay, for youth kindergarten through 12th grade. Now, we commonly use the acronym for this and call it I can write it out. It's TGFD is what we usually call it, or Too Good, because we don't really like the connotation that Too Good for Drugs has. But it is a great curriculum. It's a set of programs that really help kids and teens make healthy choices. So it's very strength-based. It focuses on preventing substance use, violence, and by teaching skills that protect kids from risky behaviors. It helps students build confidence. It's social skills. There's a lot of social emotional learning pieces to this. And it also teaches young people how to set goals, make good decisions, and communicate clearly, how to handle their emotions and build friendships with positive peers. It covers how to say no to peer pressure, solve problems, deal with conflict, and how to understand media messages. It really is just a safe, respectful, and supportive space for learning and growing with this particular curriculum. So we have been using that for several years. You can see up there on the screen, it comes with lots of games and activities that really engage kids, because we're talking some kindergartners, right? And they really focus on the importance of the repetitive messaging. So like each year it builds on itself so that, by the end they have a really good, strong foundation. So our very last slide that I have is about, how do we really include ACEs in positive childhood experiences in prevention and promotion work? And the reality is that we're facing many substance use and mental health related challenges in our country. So rather than continuously playing catch up, prevention provides us the opportunity to get ahead of these challenges so that kids, families, and communities can thrive. Prevention and promotion work uses a planning tool called the Strategic Prevention Framework to guide communities through a step-by-step process for creating effective, lasting change. This is really a planning process up here, and there are lots of trainings on this. But it is a training tool or a planning tool that can be used in communities to make sure that you are selecting the appropriate strategy for your particular community. The strategic prevention framework really helps communities assess their needs, build strong partnerships, plan and implement evidence-based strategies, and evaluate what's working. That's the most important thing. It emphasizes the importance of cultural competence and sustainability, which make our efforts respectful, inclusive, and built to last. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Miriam.
So we gave you a whole bunch of resources. All of these things are linked here. But as we go into our breakout groups, what we really want you to think about is how in your role can you be talking with youth? How can you maybe learn from some of these other programs and also just from your common sense? Because when you look at some of these curricula or tools, one of the things that you notice is that they're basic good kinds of communication, good parenting, good adult child behavior. And so what are some conversation starters that you can use to get to just engage with kids? But also, when you notice that something has changed, how do you talk about that? How do you recognize it? How do you probe to say, hey, I see you, and I see that maybe you're not okay today? And I think that we as providers can be very important role models, and also get kids used to adults asking those questions. So there are some thoughts for you there. When we think about what you're going to do from here on out, and this is what you'll do in your breakout groups, is, what do you know about what's happening in your community? If you're not sure, start to find out what's happening in your community at large, what's happening in your schools. How can you complement that? How can you ask kids who come to your practice, do you get this in school? What's it like? What do you think of it? Many of you, unfortunately, are going to find out that some of your schools are still very locked into using scare tactics, and maybe you can be a voice of reason with the Board of Education to say, you know what, that's actually not the current thinking on what's best for kids. One of the arguments for that is, if that worked, we probably wouldn't be having the problems that we're having now. And so to ask those questions, to find out what's happening, and then to think about, okay, what can you do to enhance this work that's happening both at a community level and also what you're doing in your direct practice. So we want you to think about how you can talk with youth directly, how you can enhance what you know about SUD prevention in your communities, and then what you can do to make it better. And with that, we're going to stop. Feel free to reach out to us, and thanks so much for your time today. And I will pass it back and stop sharing.
All right, thank you, Miriam and Tiffany. They explained the questions that you all are going to answer in the breakout sessions. We're going to take about 15 minutes. You'll have facilitators, and then we'll come back together and do some sharing. So look out for the link to join your breakout session. Thank you. All right, it looks like we're getting everyone back to the main room. We were just going to go over some of the discussion and highlights on what you all talked about. So one of the questions was, what can you say to youth you work with? Some of the things that came up are what not to say, and I think that's important. Sometimes we can put our foot in our mouth and say the wrong things, and then they're not listening. Asking them about some other lived experiences, I think, is important. And talking about the connections between ACEs and substance use, so they have that information. Staying away from scare tactics, I think that's probably one of my biggest takeaways. We all grew up with the DARE campaign, and some of the campaigns that show like the effects of smoking, people with trachs and things like that, that doesn't really have an effect. We were talking during the breakout session about how their frontal lobe is not really, that prefrontal cortex is not really developed till 25. So they all think it's not going to happen to them. Utilizing different platforms for kids, that can be helpful as well. Also, you can acknowledge that you don't know everything, and acknowledge feelings that don't gaslight everything is fine mentality. Minimizing how youth feel. Any other highlights that anyone had that weren't included? Or anything else that anyone wanted to say about that first question? You can drop it in the chat. For the second question, what do you need to know? What do you know and need to learn about prevention and promotion? So avoiding shame is an impediment to someone healing from trauma or from substance use. Again, the fear tactics came up, knowing they're not effective. How do we help youth connect with each other around prevention? How do we draw away from technology? And that goes for adults too. That kind of goes back to that box that we can use in the evenings, so we won't be in our phones talking to our kids. Better promoting work that is happening around the state. To partner and learn from others is important. A lot of these campaigns today I didn't know about. There was a few, but like knowing all the resources that we have. Also knowing that prevention programs can work. Again, pointing to DARE, we've all heard that doesn't work, but there are new things that are more effective. And another thing is knowing the current best practices so you can keep up with things and knowing things that can change. And there's toolkits that you can use to help you with that, so you're not just kind of flying by the seat of your pants. And then what can you do to support these efforts, and what examples from your field would apply? So Aetna does bounce trainings for free for the community. So that might be helpful in your particular area that might not have access. Family engagement activities like the family dinner plan, that's something that's accessible and small and not necessarily centered around substance abuse, but building that connection, which I feel is more and more difficult today with as many interruptions as we have in our lives. And knowing that you need to have a broad reach. So you need to include families, legislators, practitioners, students. So it's going to take our whole community, not just us in the home or waiting for the school to do things. Also incorporating this in group therapy settings. Some of these skill sets are important for that. And then people were saying using the opioid data dashboard is exciting and new, and using that in this effort. And then spreading the word about ACEs. I know a lot of people in this group have probably heard about ACEs, but the community still might not be aware. And I think another important piece is knowing the PACEs to go with it, because there's so much doom and gloom, but letting people know there are positive things that can counteract some of those negative experiences. And as someone brought up, you never know what someone is going through. I think that's important in asking people. We give a lot of information, but kind of giving time for people to talk about their experiences. Another person brought up, if you have DARE still being used in your community, gently help those folks, right? So not coming in and being like, hey, this doesn't work, you shouldn't be doing this, but like trying to educate people. And if you need more references, you can use these tools. So those are some of the things. We're at 11:29. Actually, we're at 11:30. If anyone has any final comments or questions, if you wanted to do that now, but we don't want to hold you all up for too much more time.
I was just going to say, like, I feel like the importance of focusing on the PACEs is a really big thing. Because whenever you're trying to create that change, a lot of times people are more willing to do the positive things than they are willing to admit that they've been doing the things that cause the ACEs.
And to your point, Jessica, I think that sometimes adding something positive is easier than relinquishing something that is really well ingrained, but not necessarily good, right? And so, but what the research tells us is that even if there are some things in a family that aren't terrific, if you start to add in the really good stuff, it matters and it makes a difference. And like from a fiscal standpoint, from a lobbying standpoint, where are we putting our money in this state, in our communities, in this country? If we can start to put money towards building up the positive for everybody, it will have a powerful impact and probably be a lot more cost effective than this method that we constantly have of trying to figure out, oh, we're going to prevent that thing there and this thing there and this thing there, which has not, if that worked, we wouldn't be doing this work. Like, I've been doing this work for 40 years. I've pretty much been talking about a lot of the same problems. We have better solutions now. But if trying to target and prevent the bad had been effective, I would have had to find a new career.
Exactly. It's like, so I have a little guy, he's 9 with Down syndrome. And it's like, I can tell him over and over, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. But if I don't give him that skill to replace the behavior that he is doing, then he's not really going to know what else to do, because he just doesn't know. And so, like, whenever you're dealing and you're looking at community change, whenever you're talking about a community that essentially is circling in this unhealthy environment, it's looking upon each other to do the next right thing, but you're not sure what that is. And so you're just kind of stuck in this cycle of the ACEs rather than the PACEs. So yeah, I think that it's a great point.
All right. Well, thank you all for participating. Thank you, Miriam and Tiffany, for your wonderful presentation. I think we all have learned some things that we can take back to our communities and apply. Please remember to do the survey so we can get feedback on how to improve our programming. And we really appreciate everyone. And thank you again to Aetna for being a sponsor. Hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you all so much. So glad you paid attention to this for this Grand Rounds.
It was great.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Nice to see everybody.